You're scrolling through Instagram at 11 p.m. and it hits you like a physical thing. Someone from high school just bought a house. Your college roommate got promoted again. That person you used to mentor is now somehow your boss's boss, posting a smiling selfie in an office you can't even imagine yourself walking into without feeling like a fraud. And you're exactly where you were 2 years ago. Same apartment, same salary, same explanations at family dinners. You start hearing your own voice in your head before anyone even asks. I'm figuring things out. I'm working on something. It's a weird economy. Meanwhile, everyone else looks like they got the memo about how life works, and you're standing still, watching the train pull away while you pretend you're not staring at it. If that feeling has a pulse in your chest right now, tight, electric, embarrassing, this is for you. Because here's what nobody tells you. The feeling of falling behind isn't actually about being behind. It's about living inside a very specific psychological prison, one you didn't build, but you are definitely maintaining. And what's wild is the people who feel this most intensely are often the ones who are the most thoughtful, the most aware, the most awake to what's actually happening. You see patterns. You see consequences. You see time passing. You don't float through life numb. And that awareness can feel like a curse, because it turns your life into a constant audit. So before you label this as your personal failure, consider the possibility that this not enough hum isn't a bug in your system. It might be a feature, a signal, a warning light pointing to something deeper than your productivity habits or your career decisions. The feeling of falling behind is rarely about speed. It's about meaning, expectation, and the story you were told you were supposed to live. Psychologists call the first piece of this the expectation-reality gap, and it's brutally simple. Somewhere in your mind you have a timeline. By 25 I should be here. By 30 I should be there. By 35 I should definitely have made it. And those dates aren't random. They're psychological contracts you signed with yourself, usually between ages 12 and 22, when your brain was still collecting information about how life works. You wrote that contract based on your parents' world even if you swore you wouldn't. You wrote it based on movies that skipped the boring decade between struggling and success. You wrote it based on the high achievers you watched from a distance, not knowing what their support systems looked like behind the scenes. And now you're living in the consequences of a contract you wrote with incomplete information. The economy changed. The rules changed. The culture changed. But your internal timeline stayed the same, and every time reality doesn't match it, you don't adjust the timeline, you adjust your opinion of yourself. That's the trap. Your timeline isn't just a plan. It's evidence of your worth. So when someone else looks ahead, your brain doesn't calmly think, oh, they took a different path. It thinks, I failed the test. It takes someone else's milestone as proof that you're late, lazy, defective, or missing something fundamental. And it gets worse because social media makes it feel like the test is happening in public. It's not just that you're behind, it's that everyone can see it, even if nobody actually cares. Your brain doesn't know that. Your brain only knows status, comparison, and the ancient fear of being left behind by the tribe. That leads to the second layer, the comparison machine. There's a concept in psychology called social comparison theory, and it explains why you can't stop measuring yourself against other people even when you hate doing it. Humans evolved to track their position inside a group. In the past, if you were the weakest or the least valued in a tribe of 30, you were in danger. Your brain still runs that software. The only difference is your tribe isn't 30 people anymore. It's everyone you've ever met, plus everyone they follow, plus the 3 billion people online who are curating their wins like a movie trailer. You're not comparing your life to reality. You're comparing your private, messy, unfinished behind the scenes to someone else's edited highlight reel. And your nervous system treats the result like an emergency. There's also a personality angle here that makes this hit harder for certain people. The ones who feel behind the most are often high in conscientiousness, one of the big 5 personality traits. Conscientious people are responsible, disciplined, organized, achievement-oriented. Sounds like a compliment, right? It is. But it has a shadow side. You never feel like you've done enough. Even when you accomplish something, your brain moves the goalposts. Sure, you got the promotion, but Sarah got hers faster. Sure, you finished the project, but it could have been better. Sure, you saved some money, but it's not enough for a house. The game resets every morning. And the cruel part is, the more you achieve, the more you feel behind, because now you compare yourself to higher benchmarks. This is the hedonic treadmill. You adapt to your new level, and your mind demands the next one, and the next one, and the next one. You're sprinting in place and wondering why you're exhausted. Now let's go deeper, because this feeling is rarely just about the present. It's usually connected to something older, a childhood archive your brain keeps returning to like a private courtroom. Let me tell you about a kid. She's 7. She brings home a test, 92%. She's proud. She runs to show her dad, expecting the moment to feel warm, safe, finished. He looks at it, pauses, and says, "What happened to the other 8%? He's not cruel. He might even think he's helping. He wants excellence. But what she hears is, "You are only as good as what you haven't done yet." Fast forward 20 years. She's 27 with a decent job, friends, a normal life. But when she looks at her life, she doesn't see the 92%. She sees the 8%. The startup she didn't launch. The relationship that didn't work, the degree she didn't use, the version of herself she didn't become. She's not falling behind. She's still that 7-year-old holding up a 92% and waiting for someone to say, "This is enough. You are enough." And no one does, because she never learned how to say it to herself. If you grew up in a home where love felt conditional, tied to grades, achievements, being good, being useful, then you internalized a belief that follows you into adulthood. I am what I produce. That belief becomes invisible, like air, until life slows down, until you hit a plateau, until you're in a season where you're not winning, and then suddenly existing feels like failing. Being still feels like being worthless. You can be doing fine and still feel behind, because your nervous system isn't measuring your life by stability. It's measuring your life by proof. Proof that you're earning your place. Proof that you're not disappointing anyone. Proof that you deserve to be here. And then comes the layer nobody wants to talk about because it's too raw, the mortality clock. Feeling behind isn't only about success, it's about time. Psychologists call it mortality salience, the awareness that your time is finite. Once you become aware of that, really aware, you can't unsee it. You're not just worried about career milestones, you're worried that life is happening now and you're missing it. You look at your age and your brain does that cruel math. I'm 32. Which means I'm closer to 40 than 20. If I'm this far and I've only done this much, then by the time I'm 50, it's not about being behind other people, it's about being behind time itself. And time doesn't negotiate. You can hustle harder, optimize better, wake up earlier, but you can't buy more years. So the anxiety becomes bigger than your job. It becomes a fear that you're running out of chances to become who you thought you'd be. And this creates a sick psychological paradox. You become so afraid of wasting time that you waste your time feeling bad about wasting time. You become so focused on the gap that you stop living inside the life you actually have. You start treating the present like a waiting room, like real life will begin once you catch up. Once you get the title, the relationship, the house, the body, the bank account. But the present doesn't pause. It keeps moving, and you keep judging yourself for not moving fast enough, which drains the exact energy you'd need to move. Now here's the twist, the part that changes the story if you let it. What if feeling behind is actually a sign of something good? Research suggests that people with higher self-awareness are more likely to feel dissatisfied with their progress, because they can see the gap between who they are and who they could be. They notice patterns. They think long-term. They understand complexity. Meanwhile, the Dunning-Kruger effect tells us that people with low competence often overestimate their ability because they don't know enough to see what they're missing. In other words, the people who feel behind sometimes feel that way because they're awake, because they can see how hard things actually are, because they know what mastery requires, because they have standards. That's not failure, that's intellectual honesty. And here's another angle that's even harder to admit. Maybe the reason you feel behind is because you refuse to settle. You didn't take the safe path just to check a box. You didn't stay in the relationship that felt wrong just to keep up. You didn't build a life you hated just because it looked correct from the outside. You chose meaning over speed. And in a world that worships speed, meaning looks like slowness, selectiveness looks like delay, integrity looks like being behind. Waiting for something real looks like you missed the train. But what if you didn't miss it? What if you stepped off a train you never wanted to be on? So here's the question. What if you stopped measuring yourself against timelines you didn't consciously choose? What if instead of asking, "Am I where I should be?" you asked, "Am I building a life I actually want to live?" Because the truth they don't tell you is, there is no universal supposed to. There is no cosmic checklist. No synchronized timeline where everyone hits the same milestones in the same order. People are not projects on the same schedule. You're not late. You're not behind. You're on your path, and it doesn't match anyone else's because it's not supposed to. The feeling of falling behind isn't evidence that you're failing. It's evidence that you're still holding yourself to a story that might not even be yours. Let me leave you with something real. A few years ago, I spoke with a woman who was 45. She told me she spent her entire 30s feeling behind. Everyone around her was getting married, having kids, buying houses. She was single, renting, freelancing, barely scraping by, always feeling like she was watching other people live the life she was supposed to be living. She thought she was a failure. But at 45, she ran a nonprofit that changed thousands of lives. She was in a relationship that actually felt right. She had a life she genuinely loved. And she said something that stuck with me because it sounded like a sentence written for anyone who feels behind. I wasn't behind. I was just on a slower burn. And slow burns last longer. Maybe that's you. Maybe you're not falling behind. Maybe you're taking the long route because the shortcut didn't fit who you actually are. Maybe one day you'll look back at this moment, the tightness in your chest, the shame, the fear, the quiet panic of watching everyone else move, and you'll realize you were exactly where you needed to be, building something real, something that couldn't be rushed, something that required seasons of uncertainty, seasons of waiting, seasons of becoming. So if you're feeling behind right now, I see you, and I want you to know you're not broken and you're not failing. You're human in a world that forgot how to be patient with becoming. And if this hits you in a weird way, don't scroll past that feeling too fast. Sit with it for a second, because sometimes the discomfort isn't proof that you're losing. Sometimes it's proof that you're waking up.